Hello guys, this is Johnny with another update. I did get a respiratory infection, so I was kind of down and out for a couple days, but I'm back and I'm working on the design for the game. And in this update, I want to talk about fleet capacity and fleet mechanics. And I just have to say that when you envision a video game, especially from a programming perspective, you know, you have a vision and you know what you want. You know what you want the player to experience, but when you really dive down into the design concept phase and you start building your mechanics, there's definitely a lot of details that you haven't thought of that when you start thinking about the details about individual mechanics and how those mechanics work and blend with each other, then you're definitely going to find out that there is a lot of details that you didn't think of. And when it comes to the fleet capacity system, there's basically two different types of. In Galactic Armada, there's going to be two different types of fleet capacity. One is going to be the Empire fleet capacity, which is the number of fleets that you can create. And the reason why I need a Empire fleet capacity is basically so that the galaxy doesn't become just a clustered mess with ships, which would definitely have a negative impact on performance. If empires, say, had 5,000 fleets and 100,000 ships running around, that would definitely have an impact on performance, because each individual fleet is going to have to be tracked, and not only tracked, but the movement of the fleets within the board game will be tracked and moved via programming, via transform. So, for example, whenever ships are in an area near a player, they're going to be in the 3D space simulation. But once a ship hyper jumps out and enters a range of, say, 100,000 meters and exits the visible range of the player, they'll go into a sub-simulation system, which basically transfers the ship. It'll make the ship LOD and go invisible, where the player, it won't physically exist in the galaxy. It'll be in a background process that moves the ship across the galaxy on a micro scale via transform, which will only be visible to the player on the galaxy map. So once a ship leaves the visible range of a player, they'll still be able to see where that fleet is. So say if it's their fleet, one of their fleets, and they've ordered their fleet to jump to another solar system, once that fleet and the ships within that fleet leave the visible range of the player, they'll go into sub-simulation, and the player can open up their galaxy map and they'll see the icon for that fleet on the galaxy map. But yet that fleet will still be moving across the galaxy, but it won't physically exist within the galaxy, if you can follow that. And the amount of objects that are being tracked will definitely have an effect on performance. Not that much of an effect, because we're talking about moving transforms, and you could probably, I don't know the exact number, but you could probably have thousands of transform updates, and not necessarily a transform update either, just a numerical float update on a vector. So you could probably have thousands of those within a script and not really affect CPU performance on an i5 or an i7 processor. I'm not too sure about lower end hardware or older hardware than that. But those, lower end hardware isn't really my target for this game. The minimum specs are going to be an i5, at least recommended. I'm not saying you won't be able to play it on something lower end than that, but I'm going to recommend an i5, and I'm going to test on an i5 and an i7, which is the two test machines that I have in my office. So let's get back to it. Empire fleet capacity. So the empires will be restricted to a maximum number of fleets that can be created. My goal is to achieve a balance between maximum CPU performance and the largest scale that I can achieve. This goal will hopefully be a maximum between 30 to 50 fleets per empire. Okay, and then you have internal fleet ship capacity, which is the number of ships that the player can assign to fleets. After they create a fleet, they give the fleet a name. It'll be the number of ships that you can assign from your available ships pool to that fleet. And it says, in order to limit fleet sizes and reduce the length of battles, a capacity system will be integrated that will limit the number of ships and players and AI can assign to fleets. Each ship type will consume capacity relative to its size. This system will have to be implemented and balanced during the balancing phase to achieve the desired effect, player experience. However, it will be dependent on CPU testing and resource limitations. So basically, fleet capacity, I want to have epic battles in the game, but at the same time, you always have to be consciously aware of your resource use on CPU when it comes to physics, when it comes to scripting, also weapon systems. And there will be another system that will limit the size of battles. When you have, say, 1,000 ships hyper jumping into one system, those ships are going to show up as reinforcements after it exceeds the maximum limit. So there'll still be large epic battles, but those battles could go on for a long time because basically when ships explode on various teams, more ships will be hyper jumping in until they're all either dead or have retreated or left or hyper jumped out to another solar system, which will be very possible. So here is an example of capacity use, basically, and these are all examples because what I'm doing is these are the systems that will be designed programmatically and implemented. But when I design them and I design the classes and the architecture and I integrate it, I'm not going to know exactly what these numbers need to be until the balancing phase of the game, which is I'm going to rely heavily on a community, which is why I'm building the website. And I'm going to have a forum with an alpha testers section where I'll be distributing builds, and at certain points I'm going to need the community to help me balance the game, because it's going to be something that will be incredibly difficult for me to do by myself because of it'll be time consuming. Basically, it's one of the time consuming things where it's really hard for a solo indie developer to do all the programming and then on top of it have to spend the time doing the balancing too, which is, from what I can tell, will be a fairly time consuming task because you'll have to play the game. The game will have to be playable, at least to the point to where you can buy and assign ships and go out and engage in some kind of mock battles within the game. The game won't necessarily need to be fully completed for this process to take place, but it will need to be completed to a point to where alpha testers can test to help discover where the balance needs to be to achieve the most fun experience for the player. And it doesn't have to necessarily be realistic. In my view, my game isn't completely about realism as it is as much about creating a fun experience and getting the player to feel like they're a real Empire leader in a real galactic empire. And anyway. So also we have ship purchasing and assignment. So ships in Galactic Armada will be purchasable by the Empire, but they will cost resources. And this is a diagram of an example of what resources and how much basically the ships will cost. The Empire Leader prototype fighter or gunship is basically going to be free, so if you die, you'll basically respawn in another one. Now, there will be different variations of the Empire Leader prototype ship that the player will be able to acquire through exploration of the galaxy and events and other things that they'll be able to lose, and they'll basically go back to a default prototype. Anyway, that'll be explained in another chart, basically. There'll be a chart that basically just describes the mechanics around the Empire Leader prototype ship. And so when it comes down to fighters, gunships, frigates, they're all going to have different costs. Basically, the fighter, gunships, and frigates are going to cost galactic currency. Frigates will cost galactic currency and fuel. Cruisers will cost galactic currency, fuel, and energy cells to produce. And the same thing for carriers, battleships. And troop carriers will cost galactic currency, fuel, energy cells, and troops, meaning whatever the maximum limitation I set for the troop carrier will be the minimum requirements of troops that you'll have to have available to purchase the troop carrier, in other words. and then also I have over here I have ammunition. So ammunition will be a big thing in this game. Ships will be able to run out of ammunition, and they will have to be resupplied. There will be a supply ship system where supply ships spawn at your core worlds and make supply runs out to your fleets, which initially the way I'm going to set up is going to be an automated system, but that may change. I don't want to get into that too much in this video. I will make a video solely about supply ship mechanics because it's such an important mechanic in the game. Because ships will run out of ammunition and they're going to need to be resupplied. Not only ammunition, but energy cells, and also troop carriers that can launch boarding parties can run out of troops, and they'll have to be resupplied. And supply ships will carry all forms of resources to your fleets, and supply ships will be able to be captured, etc. Keep watching for another video if you want to see exactly how supply ships are going to work, because it is a unique system to this game, meaning it's not something you've ever seen before in a space simulation. So some of the mechanics I'm designing for this game are completely unique and original, have never existed before, as to my knowledge, in any other space simulation. And I don't really know of any space simulations that blend 4X strategy with space combat that I can remember that did it very well. I think there was one a long time ago. I can't remember the name of it. It did not do very well. It wasn't very well designed. A game like this has to be well designed from the beginning. I mean, you have to put a lot of thought in. It has to be very well designed before you start actual construction, and that's something that I know because I've seen other games fail. And one of the problems with other games that have such a large complexity and scope is the developer really didn't put that much time into concept design before beginning construction of the software, which is going to lead to all kinds of problems later on down the line, as far as bugs, glitches, and just difficulty implementing new mechanics and things like that. So that's it for this video. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to do supply ship mechanics. I'm trying to cover all the systems that relate to ships, fleets, resources, resource production, and the galaxy, which is all related. All these systems are related to each other. The mechanics are blended with each other as far as ships need resources. Resources come from galaxy, come from planets, and it's all connected. Anyway, thank you for watching. Like, share, and subscribe. And until next time, which probably won't be very long, in another couple of days I'll have another video out. Thank you. Bye.